Hello, my name is Amnani, and I am a student of Business Analytics, and I am doing this presentation as part of Visualization and Analytics Assessment. This slide will have the link of the video of my presentation. So this graph was originally published in the conversation, which showed the number of deaths each day and the rate of change in the mortality rate for the 7 countries: USA, France, Spain, Italy, UK, England, and China. So these 7 countries initially had the highest death rate according to the hospital data. And method used for this graph is known as slowdown method, which means something is still rising but not rising as quickly as it was originally. So let's notice the graph. So when the curves moves to the right, this means that the death rate or mortality rate is increasing, and when it moves to the left, this means that the death rate is decreasing. And the loops indicate that the trend is changing. For example, it's rising and then it's falling and then again it's rising. So now let's discuss the graph and the author of the graph. So someone in Financial Times called it when data was so psychotic. There was a post on Twitter which referred to this graph as sense of data visualization. Someone else called it a nightmare. But there were some people who thought this graph was very creative. So the author or the cartographer of the graph is Danny Darling, who is a professor of geography at University of Exeter and is a dedicated researcher and is also a member of various advisory boards. So his audience are mainly the students of geography and members of those advisory boards, and he works at remapping the world. So now let's discuss some theory, the strengths of the graph, the weaknesses, and let's validate it. So according to Edward Tuft, it is better to violate any design principle than to put traceless or inelegant marks on paper. And according to Donis A. Randis, boredom is as much a threat in visual design as it is elsewhere in art and communication. The mind and eye demand stimulation and surprise, and I think we can all agree on that this chart certainly stimulates and surprise both our mind and our eyes. So now let's discuss some of the basic principles according to Edward Tuft's principles. And the first one is clutter chart chunk. So I do agree that some people do find the chart quite messy, but if you see uh, each line depicts a country which is in a different color, and the small loops they indicate the change in trend, and then it just shows the rate of change and average death toll each day, and also like there are important dates such as lockdown, when was lockdown imposed in which country. So that's how we know how the decrease or the fall accelerated initially. But as such, there is no chunk, there is no cluster, there's nothing which is not required in it. Like everything is very important. So the next one is data ink. Data ink is a non-erasable core of data. If we notice data ink ratio, it seems very proportionate. There are no additional lines, there are no additional information, there are no additional labels in it. If you are given a chance to make it better, there's no way we can make this chart a little better because there's nothing non-essential in it and it depicts a huge amount of data. So the next one is color palette. I do agree that this chart is very colorful. There are 7 different colors used for lines for 7 different countries. But if those colors would not have been chosen, I mean, if the colors would not have been chosen, this graph could seem much more complex, and I think it would have been almost like impossible to distinguish the lines and how the trend for each country is changing. So I think the uh, number of colors used was also a very essential part of it, and it has made easier to understand the chart. So the next one is clarity. If we see if we understand the concept that how the way it is moving to right, the curve to right is increased and the curve to left is decreased, we do understand very easily. That graph is very clear. We see how the trend is changing, and I think this is very concise graph. Like, because if we see try and recognize this information elsewhere, it would have been very I mean, there are a number of I have personally seen the data, and it's a huge amount of data. I think without this graph, it would have taken much longer to understand it. So the next thing is, we can unanimously say that we do not see such graphs in our daily life. This is a very rare kind of a graph, and it illustrates a huge amount of data. So we can say that it took a lot of thought, time, and designing before making this chart, and it is not very easily madeable by anyone. So this is a very thoughtful graph, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of versions must have come out before this final version came out for its audience. So we can now say that the just like Edward says, that the golden rule for visual data is that it is self-explanatory, and I think this graph is very self-explanatory. We do need few minutes to understand how it is happening and what's happening, and then we can easily explain ourselves, and this is like very easily predictable. Also, the only essential data ink is used. Is no non-data essential non-data ink which has been used in the chart. It shows a huge amount of data, and is very precise. If we see the amount of data it is showing, colors only show lines for each country. The labels, the axes are properly and the legends are properly labeled. Only the different countries, the label for different countries and different colors are showing each country. So also that is also very precise. So here are two of the recommendations. But please, before that, forgive my poor graph qualities. I'm really bad at making them. And these graphs do not depict real-time data. These are imaginary graphs. So first one is on the left side. If you see, these lines shows average number of deaths per day for 3 different countries, you can say. And these bars or histograms can predict increase or decrease in deaths per day. So we can color these graphs as well. This is just an imaginary chart, just an idea of what else could have been done if we do not make that graph, and like how we could have made something like something out of this chart. So second chart is, my idea is we can make multiple charts for various countries. The first one is very similar chart. I tried to make for the Spain only. It shows how the trend was moving in Spain. Not exactly, this is not a real-time data, but just like we can make various small charts for each countries, so they can be a bit more clearer and precise. And people who think it is psychotic or messy or complex, so they can like easily depict it. It has the same kind of loops, and it's ending on that this orange dot. And I tried to like retain it for Spain. And this is it. Thank you so much for listening to me, and thank you so much.